Hello and welcome everyone to another video about my plugin Xen. But this time it's not just about Xen but also about Supermodal and about the final implementation of Xen. In my past videos I made some assumptions about the MPE standard that were not correct, and now that I know the full picture I can tell you what you actually have to do much more precisely. So watch this video if you just want to know how to use Xen in general, and watch this video especially if you want to know how to use Xen with this nice physical modeling effect Supermodal by Polyverse. First of all, you need to instantiate an instrument. Which instrument? Of course, Xen. By default, it has now the pitch bend range on 48 semitones because that's just what the MPE standard says you should do. You can still select a different pitch bend range if needed. Also, use Synth is now on default because I feel like before you start attaching a different synthesizer to Xen, you should just jam a little bit and find an Edo scale that you want to work with. So this is just 12 Edo, the way we all know and love it. But now I change it to, let's say, 9 Edo. Or maybe 5 Edo. Which sounds pretty interesting. You have to really rewire your brain when it comes to the patterns that you are usually writing in a piano roll. Like for example, I would never write melodies where there are just semitone steps all over the place. That would never cause a reasonable chord progression in 12 Edo. But in 5 Edo, where each interval is already much bigger, you can actually pull this off and it still sounds like a reasonable chord progression. So yeah, that's just how you have to work when you are using alternative Xen scales. At this point, when you have figured out a chord progression or a melody that you like, you can start adding other synthesizers. For example, Surge. And you have to activate the MPE feature. And at this point, it should already work when you are routing the MIDI correctly. Except for the little thing, here in Cubase at least, you have to tell the track that it should take all of the available MIDI channels and not just number one, which for some reason is not the default behavior. What I also like to do is disabling the MIDI inputs so that it doesn't get confused by other tracks, because sometimes for some reason the input is automatically routed from a different track in Cubase. I have no idea why. Like this DAW is full of weird workflows that make no sense. By the way, you might be wondering why I'm not using Bitwig. The reason is because Bitwig doesn't allow plugins to output pitch bend values. And pitch bend values are desperately needed to convert MIDI notes to different Xen scales, because you have to kind of trick the synthesizers to think that they are currently playing 12 Edo, and you are doing that by going to the nearest note where it would be in 12 Edo and using pitch bend to go to the exact point of the Edo scale. Now select the MIDI output from Xen and activate the monitor. You could also use the record thingy, but the problem with the record thingy is it changes when you click on different things. So the better workflow is to use the monitor so that it stays the same. The problem is that it still activates the record thingy when you are clicking on things, and that sometimes causes a little bit of a disruption in the audio playback. I have no idea how I can turn that off. I could swear that I found a setting for that in the Cubase program settings at some point, but I couldn't find it again now that I tried it. And yeah, if anyone knows better, please let me know. As far as I know, this is the best workflow so far. And now we can listen to the output. Ironically, usually I really like Unison, but when it comes to experimenting with alternative Xen scales, I really want to hear what they are doing, so I'm not using as much Unison as I usually would. I should probably get into the habit of just doing it anyway, because otherwise how am I supposed to normalize Xen scales? When you have figured out that everything works fine, then you can turn off the internal synthesizer of Xen, because now you can trust your other synthesizers to do the right thing and keep on tweaking the setting. Sweet, I like that. Let's come to the part that I hyped you up for earlier, which is adding Supermodal. In order to do that, we need an audio track with hopefully something percussive, like these fills. Since we are going to use Supermodal, we don't need to be too pedantic about keeping the performance of this fill-in the way it was originally. Instead, I will just repeat these 3 hits over and over again. Actually, that's already pretty cool. I didn't expect this to be any useful, but I could imagine this being super nice and smashy with some kilohertz dynamics in upwards compression mode. Maybe if this goes into a shoegazy direction later, I might consider it. But for now, I will disable this effect and instead load Supermodal. So the first thing I do is I select the vibraphone because it has a very harmonic sound. Now I go to a clear octave, like -12, 0, 12 or anything. Supermodal has this super nice workflow where you can change the pitch in a super floating way or on exact octaves or on exact semitones or on exact cents. Like it has everything that you can wish from a pitch parameter. What I'm going to do now is I set the pitch wheel modulation on this pitch to 48, the MPE standard, and then I add another modulator for note values, which will just have the full range. And now this should be sort of MPE compatible, no smoothing. Yeah, now we have to make sure that the MIDI is rerouted. If any Steinberg developers are watching, then please tell me one thing. Why do I have to make an extra MIDI track for this? This should just be an option on an instrument track to send on the MIDI to another track so that you don't have to make a million extra tracks for all kinds of nonsense. This is the kind of reason why I usually use Bitwig, you know? This makes no sense and I want you to feel call out for that. However, I'm making an exception right now because, as I said, you can only use Xen in the combination of DAWs like this. Now I have to be careful about the MIDI channels again. So here we are passing through Xen's MIDI output to Supermodal, and let's see what this will yield. So we can see and hear that it already does the right thing, goes in the right direction, even though Supermodal doesn't even allow MPE inputs and especially not polyphonic ones. So we want to make it a little bit more clear what Supermodal should be doing here by adding a MIDI arpeggiator. I will set this up to play 8th notes with a shorter length to make sure that there are really no overlapping notes. This one's cool too. Okay, so now that I have the sound, maybe I could use kilohertz dynamics, but the other way around. Yeah. Okay, I gotta say, I got a little bit carried away here. But yeah, that's just how making music should be. And yeah, I'm glad that my plugin Xen also seems to be compatible with this effect. It was a little bit tricky at first. I thought it wouldn't be possible, especially because Supermodal is not quite an effect that boasts about being MPE compatible. It definitely isn't. It isn't even polyphonic. But if you're just respecting its boundaries, like that you can only go into it with monophonic input and correctly setting the pitch wheel modulation, then of course you can use Supermodal together with my plugin Xen to play around with alternative Xen scales. And I think that's pretty refreshing.